Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about the next set of G.I. Joe comics. And this is honestly one of my least favorite stories in the G.I. Joe run. And that may sound harsh at first, but as we get into the stories, I think you'll see why. Because in this video we'll also be covering two separate stories. But yeah, these stories, like most of the other G.I. Joe comics, are written by Larry Hama, and like a lot of those stories we've been talking about lately with G.I. Joe, they're drawn by Ron Wagner. So the art is decent, the writing is all right, but I don't know what it is about the comic the G.I. Joe comic at this time. It just really feels like it's kind of slumming off. But yeah, these were released in early 1988. I believe January to March or April, maybe even May. Yeah, January to May is the release date of these. And yeah, they're all right, but none of them are favorites. In fact, they're some of my least favorites. So let's just hop into our stories. And to open the story, we see Baroness, Dr. Mindbender, and Cobra Commander selling terrordromes to an Eastern European nation. But the leader of the nation is cutting ties with Cobra and has some special U.S. weapons testing en route. But we see that the Cobras are continuing to unload additional weapons to warehouse them in the port, and inside the Cobra headquarters that's again in that port, we see that all the Cobras throw on some headphones and activate a paranoia-inducing low-frequency wave and watch as the country begins to turn to riot, with all the people turning against each other. We then see that this has been Cobra's plan all along, to create a market where they can sell arms, and in this case, they're selling the arms to the leader of the country so that he can impose martial law. We then cut to an airstrip where we see that the battalion of Cobra maggots, hisses, and wolves are trying to stop the Joe's cargo plane from landing. But the Joes are able to get their vehicles dropped off. And after doing some work to clear the runway, the C-130 is able to make its escape. Then at the military HQ that Cobra is operating out of, we learn that the Joes were welcomed into the country to look after a special testing and research station. We then see Cobra scramble a team of Mambas to chase down the Joes. Next we see that the special unit that the Joes are there to meet, and we see that the special unit has figured out that the terrordromes are releasing an ultra-high frequency signal that is causing everyone to lose their minds. We then cut back to the Joes, and we see them arguing and bickering among themselves until the Mambas, who have been following them, get a little too close and get shot out of the sky. We then see the Baroness has her maggots and hiss tanks fire on the Joes, but they're out of range. We then see the Baroness call in a squadron of wolves, vehicles designed specifically to be used in the snow and for tracking, and eventually the Cobras catch up to the Joes and a firefight begins. And the Joes are doing good until they're surrounded, but the Joes are saved by the testing unit that they came to provide security for, the Battle Force 2000. Then we see that Duke has broken off from the rest of the group and has brought an offer of alliance from the U.S. government to the Prime Minister of the country, an offer that the Prime Minister accepts, leading the Cobras to be forced out of the country. To open our next issue, we see General Hawk, Roadblock, and Psych Out driving to the American Embassy in the now overrun Sierra Gordo. The fictional country was overrun off-page by a new character named General Vilvica. And the Joes are there to pull out the U.S. ambassador and sanitize the documents housed in the embassy. Next, we see a group of Vilvica's soldiers are attacking one of the last Cobra strongholds in the country, a terrordrome, and they're doing this as part of a weapons demonstration by Destro, who is trying to get Vilvica to agree to an arms deal with him. Destro was able to take out the terrordrome and its fire bat, but the Dreadnoks, who had been the commanding officers of the terrordrome, are able to get away in the Thunder Machine. Back at the embassy, we see that the Joes are about to be surrounded by Vilvica's troops, who want some of the files that the Joes are going to bring back to the U.S. and use as proof against Vilvica and the North American banana monopoly. And to create a diversion, the Joes blow up the embassy and head for the airstrip where they left their C-130 cargo plane. On the landing strip, we see that the Dreadnoks have arrived and have taken a bunch of refugees hostage so that they can coerce the Joes into giving them a ride out of Sierra Gordo. And we see that it works, and Wild Bill takes off just as Hawk arrives with the ambassador, leaving the Joes on the ground to contend with Vilvica's army alone until the counter-revolutionaries show up and save the Joes. We then see that the C-130 is shot down, and the Destro has been selling weapons and information to both the revolutionaries and Vilvica. So he is also profiteering from both sides of this little skirmish. We then see Wild Bill is forced to crash the C-130 into the woods because he was shot out of the sky. And we also see that all of the Joes, refugees, and Dreadnoks make it out of the plane just before it blows up. We then see General Vilvica and a representative of the North American banana monopoly commission Destro to hunt down the ambassador and Hawk's unit of Joes. We then see Hawk and the revolutionaries walking through the jungle searching for a contact who can lead them out of Sierra Gordo. The crew finds the building where they think their guide is, but they find that it's been overrun by Vilvica's men. So they break out into a firefight, and eventually the Joes toss a grenade into the building and take out all of the hostiles. But Vilvica's soldiers were able to get a message out, and the rest of the army is on its way. And as the troops come charging in, Roadblock begins to mow them down, but they're running low on ammo until Destro shows up in his helicopter and fires on Vilvica's army, betraying Vilvica and making a deal with the revolutionaries, and making a deal with Hawk to take him, his team, and the ambassador out of Sierra Gordo. So Hawk and his whole crew are clear, but we cut back to the jungle and we see that Wild Bill is splinting Thrasher's arm, setting it in a cast, and the crew gets moving until they come up to a bus, which they hijack, and they send the refugees off on their own, since Vilvica's searching for the Joes and the Dreadnoks, not the refugees. Back in the city, we see that General Vilvica is confronted by Destro and the counter-revolutionaries. We see the refugees come and pick up the rest of the crew, and they start driving through barricades and driving into the city because they know that there will be a plane of some kind in the city and they can get out of Sierra Gordo that way. Destro is trying to get the country's treasury supply, but the representative of the North American banana monopoly has all the money already and is headed for a plane. While Destro, General Vilvica, and the revolutionaries are racing down to the plane, we see that one of Vilvica's soldiers sees Vilvica with the revolutionaries and shoots him for betraying the country. So Vilvica just dies. We then see Wild Bill and his crew get on the banana monopoly plane while Destro chases them down, trying to shoot them out of the sky so that he can catch the banana monopoly guy. But in the plane, we see the representative of the banana monopoly come out and try to hold up the plane, but Thrasher just pushes him out of the plane and kills him. And that's where the story ends. And honestly, this is just a whack set of stories, man. I would say the artwork in them is, for the most part, pretty good. There's one issue that Ron Wagner does not draw, and that's this issue 69, and that's drawn by Tony Salmons. And honestly, I just hate his artwork. It has so little detail to it. It's very undynamic. I don't like the art in that issue at all, but I do weirdly think it's the best written issue of the set, even though it's my least favorite to read. And honestly, this is just a weird issue. It feels like they're the first two stories, the first two issues, the stories where they're in the Arctic or not the Arctic, where they're in the snowy wasteland in Eastern Europe. Those just feel like they were like Larry Hama got told, hey, you got to introduce Battle Force 2000, the Snowcat, the Persuader, the Maggot, and the Wolf, all this month. It feels like there's a lot of editorial mandate going on with that story. And then the next story is honestly just weird. Like, Destro just kind of shows up again out of nowhere and is like, yeah, I'm going to do basically what Cobra's doing, but I'm going to do it better. And that's just a weird thing for Destro to want. The character motivation doesn't quite make sense there. And it is interesting that Destro has his own. And we'll see that interesting dynamic of Destro's army grow in later stories. But for now, it's honestly just kind of an odd beginning to a lot of stuff and a bridge between a lot of stuff. This is, we kind of get Cobra's big plan revealed. We get Destro reintroduced to the comic. And we see that the tensions are definitely rising within Cobra. This is also, I believe, the story where we learn that Destro and Baroness, Cobra Commander and the Baroness are definitely an item of some sort. And it's also worth remembering, this isn't the real Cobra Commander. Real Cobra Commander is dead. Fred, one of the Crimson Guardsmen, killed him. So this isn't even the real Cobra Commander. There's just a lot going on in the comic that you kind of have to remember. And editorially, I don't know why they let so much stuff go unchecked and unbalanced for as long as they do. Because they just bring stuff up out of nowhere that you will have forgotten about by the time it gets brought up again. Like in those issues in the Eastern European country. Part of the reason that Cobra has that technology is because in issue 2 of the G.I. Joe comic, they like briefly mention this technology, that they have this but that's all the explanation we get. It's just a weird pull for this story. And honestly, these are just not my favorite stories. I don't have much to say on them. That Wild Bill Hawk story, that's a 3-issue long story. And honestly, it should have been a single issue or 2 issues. But it is what it is. And honestly, that's all I really have time for today. So I'm just another guy named James, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.